about how to view China's emergence. Let me be clear. Let me be clear. I believed in 1979 and said so, and I believe now that a rising China is a positive development, not only for the people of China, but for the United States and the world as a whole. A rising China will fuel economic growth and prosperity, and it will bring to the fore a new partner with whom we can meet global challenges together. When President Obama and I took office in January of 2009, we made our relationship with China a top priority. We were determined to set it on a stable and sustainable course that would benefit the citizens of both our countries. Our presidents have met 9 times since then, including very successful state visits in Beijing and Washington, and have spoken numerous times by telephone. Direct discussions between senior policymakers and the personal ties that result from such discussions, in my view, over the last 35 years of conducting foreign policy, are the keys to building cooperation. They're built on understanding. They allow us to better understand each other and allow us to define our interest in ways that are clear so that each one of us know what the other country's interests are, and to see the world through the eyes of the other, with the intention of preventing miscommunications and misconceptions that tend to fuel mistrust. With that goal in mind, we have worked very hard to develop our cooperative partnership through more than 60 separate dialogues on issues of matter to both China and to the United States, and I would suggest to the world as a whole. The premier forum is what we refer to as the Strategic and Economic Dialogue, which brings together policymakers from across both governments to discuss a range of issues from trade barriers to climate change. But we also recognized immediately on starting that the importance of more directly addressing security issues as well. That's why in May, we jointly launched the first Strategic Security Dialogue, a new channel for civilian and military leaders to discuss sensitive topics, including cyber and maritime security. That's why it's also important that our military leaders work together, get to know one another. Not just our political leaders, but our military leaders, as Admiral Mullen and General Chen have begun to do in their recent exchange of meetings. The fact is, China and the United States face many of the same threats and share many of the same objectives and responsibilities. But because we sometimes view threats from different perspectives, that is, China and the United States view them from different perspectives, or favor a different way in dealing with what we perceive to be joint threats, our generals should be talking to each other alongside with our diplomats as frequently as our diplomats do. Like China, the United States has a huge stake in the prosperity and stability of Asia and the Pacific. I look forward to visiting 2 other Asian nations on this trip. When I leave China, I'll go to Mongolia and then to Japan. The United States, and I realize this occasionally causes some discomfiture, but the United States is a Pacific power and will remain a Pacific power. Over the last 60 years, no country has done more than we have to ensure the stability and security of the Asian Pacific region. And I'd respectfully suggest that it has been good for China, allowing China to focus on domestic development and to benefit from a growing market. America's focus on this critical region will only grow in the years to come as Asia plays an even greater role in the global economy and international affairs. As President Obama said in Tokyo during his first visit to Asia as president, and I quote, "The United States of America may have started as a series of ports and cities along the Atlantic Ocean, but for generations, we have also been a nation of the Pacific. Asia and the United States are not separated by this great ocean. We are bound by it. That's why we've begun this dialogue, this Asian-Pacific dialogue on issues to expand cooperation in the region where we both live and operate. Let me give you another example of our security cooperation. The United States and China are also working with international partners to counter the threat posed by the spread of nuclear weapons, materials, and technology, so-called non-proliferation. Along with 46 other world leaders, President Hu honored us by joining President Obama and me at the Nuclear Security Summit in April of last year. And our nations are now collaborating on a Center for Excellence to provide nuclear security in China. In my discussions with Vice President Xi this week, I said we have to deepen our conversation on the world's two primary nuclear proliferating challenges, North Korea and Iran. I know that China shares our concern, but some of you may wonder why our focus, the focus of the United States, is so intense. The reason is clear. If armed with nuclear weapons on long-range missiles, North Korea and Iran would pose a direct and serious threat to the security of the United States of America and our allies. It would present an existential threat. That is why we've been working with China and our international partners to maintain peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula and to achieve a complete denuclearization of North Korea. And it is why, as the Iranian government continues its illicit nuclear program, we have worked with a range of partners and international institutions to enact the toughest sanctions that Iran has ever faced. And without vigilant implementation of these sanctions, Iran will evade the consequences of the actions, and diplomacy will not be effective in stopping their nuclear program. So we will continue to look to China to send a clear message to Iranian leaders through its words and its deeds that Iran, must live up to their international obligations. There are many other security challenges the United States and China share, from Afghanistan to Pakistan to the Sudan. And we have been and will continue to discuss our mutual interests and concerns, continuing to develop our security dialogue and cooperation is the surest way to meet these joint challenges. Economic issues, to state the obvious, have been of particular focus of our nation's growing cooperation. Together, we're working to promote economic growth that is strong, sustainable, and balanced, and trade that is free and fair. Trade and investment between our countries are growing rapidly in both countries, in both directions, creating jobs and economic opportunities in both countries. We often hear about Chinese exports to the United States, but last year, American companies in America exported $110 billion worth of goods and services to China, supporting hundreds of thousands of jobs in America. The American people and the Chinese people, I hope, are becoming aware that it's in our mutual interest in each of our countries to promote that exchange. A more prosperous China will mean more demand for American-made goods and services and more jobs back home in the United States of America. So our desire for your prosperity is not born out of some nobility. It is in our self-interest that China continue to prosper. Every day it becomes clear that as the world's two largest economies with ever-growing ties of investment and commerce, what you do matters to us and matters to the American people, and what we do matters to you and to the people of China. To state it bluntly, we have a stake in one another's success. Just as putting America's fiscal policy on a long-term sustainable path is important not only to the United States, but to China, to China's economy, shifting China economy, which the 12th five-year plan calls for, to rely more heavily on consumer demand in China is not only important to China, but it's important to the United States of America. As Chinese leaders have told me, this five-year plan will require them to take a number of steps, including continuing their effort to move toward a more flexible exchange rate. It's in China's interest, but it's also overwhelmingly in the interest of the United States. In this time of uncertainty in the global economy, it is all the more important that we take the difficult but necessary steps together and, along with our G20 partners, continue to sustain a global recovery and create jobs and prosperity. We're the two biggest engines in the world to be able to do that. As I said in May, when I opened the annual Strategic and Economic Dialogue in Washington, I said, quote, "For many of the world's most pressing challenges, it is a simple fact that when the United States and China are not at the table, the solution to the problem is less possible." But even as we cooperate, the United States and China also will compete. And competition is healthy. We will compete in global politics and global economics. And also, it is a feature of global politics and economics. It's also a feature of human nature to observe others, to consider how they measure up, to strive to be the best. That's good for both of us. Genuine competition pushes our companies and our people to perform better. And we should reject the misplaced notion of the zero-sum game, in which everything one nation achieves somehow comes at the expense of the other. It is the opposite. So make no mistake, America not only welcomes this healthy competition, competition is stitched into the very fabric of our society and our economic system. And while I may be a little biased, I have overwhelming confidence in the capability of the American people to compete on a level playing field with any nation and any peoples in the world. But for this competition to benefit us both, it must take place on a level playing field, with rules that are clear and treat all countries fairly and equally. While the United States and China are working hard to get this right, we still face obstacles of doing business in each other's countries. That's why I acknowledge on this trip the United States should undertake to make it easier for Chinese business people to obtain visas to travel to the United States. It takes much too long for that to happen. That's not in our interest. And why we're in the midst, also is the reason why President, once he took office, ordered, for the first time in decades, we're in the midst of a total reform of our export control system. Already, we have made thousands of new items available for export to China for exclusive civilian use that were not available before, some of which require a license while others don't. And tens of thousands of more items will become available very soon. That's a significant change in our export policy, and a rejection of those voices in America that say we should not export that kind of technology for civilian use in China. We disagree, and we're changing. But it's also why we're troubled when American investors are prohibited from having wholly owned, fully owned subsidiaries of their own company in many sectors in China, and excluded from sectors, entirely excluded from competing in other sectors. Restrictions that no other major economy in the world imposes on us or anyone else so broadly. And that's why we have pushed Chinese officials to protect intellectual property rights. We have welcomed the Chinese State Council's recent campaign to enforce intellectual property rights, a commitment that President Hu made when he visited, and he's keeping. But the effort must be strengthened and extended. According to the International Trade Commission, American companies lose $48 billion a year and tens of thousands of jobs because of pirated goods and services. These protections, intellectual property protections, not only benefit the United States and United States workers, United States companies, but I would argue Chinese companies as well, as they increasingly seek to safeguard their own creations. You're here at this great university. It's very much in your interest that intellectual property be protected, because some of you are the future artists, the future entertainers, the future innovators who want to be able to have a market for what you do. But if it can be acquired cheaply and pirated, why would anybody pay you for the same service? America's focus on global security, free trade, and economic fairness is long-standing. Since the end of World War II, we've helped build an international system that promotes peace and stability, gives all states the opportunity to share in global prosperity, and provides rules to protect basic human rights of all citizens. China's tremendous progress, in my view, can be attributed to the industriousess and talent of the Chinese people, as well as its leadership. But it was made possible, I'd respectfully suggest, by an international architecture that promoted stability and prosperity and enables upward mobility for all countries. I know that many Chinese and probably many of you students believe that your nation will continue on a path of greater prosperity. I agree that it will. That is my view, my prediction. But I also know that some of you are skeptical about America's future prospects. With that in view, I would like to suggest that I respectfully disagree with that view and will allay your concerns. Let me put this in perspective so you can understand why the American people are also confident about their future. America today is by far the world's largest economy, with a GDP of almost $15 trillion, about 2.5 times as large as China's, the second largest, with a per capita GDP which is more than $47,000, 11 times that of China's. I've read that some Chinese are concerned about the safety of your investments in American assets. Please understand, no one cares more about this than we do, since Americans own 87% of all our financial assets and 69% of all our treasury bonds, while China owns 1% of our financial assets and 8% of our treasury bills, respectively. So our interest is not just to protect Chinese investment. We have an overarching interest in protecting the investment, while the United States has never defaulted and never will default. I also have confidence in the fundamentals of our economy. Vice President Xi said it best, I think, when he told a group of Chinese and American business leaders with whom we met the day before yesterday, and I quote him, he said, "The U.S. economy is highly resilient and has a strong capacity to repair itself." He is right. I believe America is even better equipped to compete in the economy of the future than it was in the economy of the past. In the 20th century, the wealth of a nation was primarily measured by the abundance of its natural resources, the expanse of its landmass, the size of its population, and the potency of its army. But I believe in the 21st century, the true wealth of a nation will be found in the creative minds of its people and their ability to innovate, to develop the technologies that will not only spawn new products, but create and awaken entire new industries. The United States is hardwired for innovation. It's part of our DNA from our earliest days. It has enabled generation after generation of Americans to give life to world-changing ideas. From the cotton gin to the airplane to the microchip to the internet to the world-leading companies like General Electric, Ford, Microsoft, and Google, and I could go on and on.